Now let's take a look at the Indifferent, another of his classic playboy poses. Again, a kind of a dramatic monologue. He was a real precursor in this style. Robert Browning famously will take up this style and develop it even further a couple hundred years later. But you get another pose of, the bon vivant, the man about town, the good time Charlie. The role himself is one that, or the role itself is one that Donne himself characterized kind of cleanly for humanity or posterity by saying that he identified two different characters in his collected writings. The first was the poems of his youth, where he styled himself as Jack Donne, or at least that's what he called that body of work, as it was written by Jack Donne, who's the kind of cocky young guy who likes to show off what he can do with words, is just a little too smart for everybody around him, and he likes to flaunt that just a little bit. So he writes about, kind of suggestive things and other flashy stuff that young guys will be attracted to, and he will do it in a way that peacocks for the world. And then his later work he characterized as Dr. Donne, and that's when he was the good Dr. Dean of St. Paul's, the very proper, very moral, and very serious exemplar preaching from the pulpit of St. Paul's Cathedral. So we're still in the Jack Donne phase here. Again, we don't really have dates for this stuff, but you can see basic characteristics throughout, in addition to through lines as well as contrasts. The Indifferent! I can love both fair and brown, whom abundance melts, and her whom want betrays, her who loves loneness best, and her who masks and plays, her whom the country formed and whom the town, her who believes, and her who tries, and her who still weeps with spongy eyes, and her who is dry cork and never cries. I can love her, and you, and you. I can love any, so she be not true. Will no other vice content you? Will it not serve your turn to do as did your mother's? Or have you all old vices spent, and now would find out others? Or doth a fear that men are true torment you? Oh, we are not. Be not so you. Let me, and do you 20 know. Rob me, but bind me not, and let me go. Must I, who come to travail through you, grow your fixed subject, because you are true? Venus heard me sigh this song, and by love's sweetest part variety she swore. She heard not till now, and that it should be so no more. She went, examined, and returned ere long, and said, alas, some 2 or 3 poor heretics in love there be, which think to establish dangerous constancy. But I have told them, since you will be true, you shall be true to them who are false to you. Which is a familiar pose of the waggish young man, the stylish young playboy. You can love blondes or brunettes, big girls, skinny girls, rich girls, down and dirty girls, doesn't matter. He is ambivalent, caught between the choices. And that sense of being between things is one that we've seen already with him. the pressure that builds between two poles when you're just stuck in the middle. The fun of it is part of it. Certainly more eroticism being played around with here. The all too familiar pose of the young man who is too wise to fall for love. I have been in love, I know it, and I'd rather just focus on having my good time and not invest myself with that level of seriousness. Love is, after all, so much just a physical thing. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. We're just here to have a good time, right? The separation of the physical from the spiritual is very prominent here. And that positioning also, the objectifying of the heart by exercising the mind and saying, yeah, I know what love is. That's a prominent element of Shakespeare's sonnets. Knowing love rather than being in it. And so he can objectify it a little bit more and complain that this girl is maybe getting a little too clingy. Must I, who came to travail through you, grow your fixed subject because you are true? Hey, babe, I never promised you we'd be exclusive. You said you wanted to be. That's great for you. It's not an unfamiliar dynamic to anybody. But certain things do strike. I can love both fair and brown, her whom abundance melts and whom want betrays. Her whom abundance melts and her whom want betrays. Want here means she wants something. She is perhaps lacking in something. Maybe you can find glosses on this that suggest that, well, okay, abundance melts might be full-figured gal, and want betrays might be a little bony. Or perhaps abundance is a suggestion of wealth, and want is she's trying to stretch $1. Or even it's a moral attitude where you are so luxurious in abundance that the morals all fly away. Or you are so strict with your habits that you cling to your morals very jealously and rigidly. Either way is a curious line. But you know, it kind of makes me think of Martin Luther. Because one of his criticisms of the Catholic Church was that it was a little too lackadaisical in its practices. Too many priests were out there suddenly being presented with children that they had had. Too many people were just a little too easy on themselves instead of dwelling in a kind of rigidity. And if you look at churches in the north of Europe versus the south of Europe, Southern Europe, you find all of these gorgeous old Catholic churches with beautiful artwork, enormously overwhelming architecture, very sensuous decorations. And then you go to Northern Europe, where the Protestant Reformation really took hold. And it can be rather stripped down, unadorned, even cold, and unforgiving. That austerity is a primary element of the church, as opposed to the luxury of the Catholic Church. So as we go through, I can love both fair and brown, blondes, brunettes in one respect, or the pretty or the earthy in another. Her whom abundance melts and whom want betrays. Abundance, the Catholics, want, the Protestants. Her who loves loneliness best, and her who loves her who masks and plays. Masks and plays are a staple of Catholic tradition in worship, not so much in the Protestant realm. When the Puritans came in England, they shut down all theaters because they were seen as a corrupting influence, a holdover of an old Catholic monarchy. Her whom the country formed and whom the town, big city folks, or common people from the land. Her who believes and her who tries. Believes. That seems to be a very direct ringing of a spiritual bell. And her who tries. Faking it, perhaps. And who still weeps with spongy eyes, and her who is dry cork and never cries. That emotional aspect of religion coming in there, as opposed to a more dry Lutheran quality, almost more Calvinist in its approach. So you're getting another image of Donne as a young man, as the Jack Donne persona, finding himself positioned between these different extremes, these different alternatives, the Catholic and the Protestant, which was the defining choice of his professional life. The further complication in there, of course, is the sexual element of it, because he is also yoking together more sex and spirituality, the physical and the spiritual rubbing up against one another and creating great tension in those lines, so that when you're reading it, it's whispering to you little things in a kind of in-joke way. You get this, right? You and I, we know one another. You know what I am saying when I'm not really saying it, but I'm sort of saying it, but you can read between those lines. The poem is prompting you to do that. And it's open enough that you can do that. So it's not just written for, his 12 friends who are going to get this in manuscript, like they're passing around, on a text chain, and nobody else will see it. Here he is playing on all those different levels simultaneously, and each one of those levels is putting a different cast on the one before it. So they're all creating tension between them.